Hi, this is Rob Galvin. Thanks for joining today. I am your host for the RhoMobile weekly webinar series. So thanks for joining. Today we have a good topic, which we're going to take up quite a bit of time going through this. So we're going to keep things moving along here. But today we have a topic that Geof Poremba is going to cover regarding RhoConnect and our ability to connect directly to a database. So he's going to walk through that scenario. And just a quick reminder for housekeeping here, any questions that you have during the conference, please type those into GoToMeeting, and we'll queue those up when Geof is done with his presentation. This meeting is being recorded, and just in case you need to leave before the session is over, we will have the replay up by the end of the week. There's the QR code to jump back to the replay for this session. And then, of course, when you exit the webinar, if you can provide some feedback on how well this presentation was, as well as any suggestions for future topics that you'd like to see covered, that would be very much appreciated. So next week, just so you know, we are continuing to try to do these every Wednesday at the same time. Next week, I'll be going over walking through how to actually build a RhoMobile application targeting big Windows, Windows 7 platforms, and walking through how to set that up and talking about that scenario. So that's the topic for next week. Last week, if you missed the last webinar, we covered a topic on performance, web page performance, and some best practices around writing your pages so that they're performing the best that they can. There's the QR code for the replay if you want to watch the replay if you missed it last week. And of course, like I mentioned before, in the past webinars, if you're interested in participating or being a guest speaker, we have a couple that are already lined up for this. Please reach out to me at my email. So, all right. So like I said, we have a good topic today that will cover a decent amount of time here. So let's jump over into that. Geof, welcome to the session. Let me hand the reins over to you without further ado.
Thank you, Rob.
Here. All right, so let me make you presenter. All right, Geof. So you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, can you see my screen, Rob?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, Rob, and thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm going to start by going through some slides real quickly. I'm going to assume that most of you have some passing familiarity with RhoConnect, and our topic today is going to be really utilizing RhoConnect to integrate directly with the relational database system. So let's get started. First off, just a really high-level look at the RhoConnect architecture. RhoConnect, of course, is our integration and synchronization middleware server. It's used to integrate with your enterprise backend systems and to make that data available to RhoConnect clients. Of course, we have an integrated client with our RhoElements client framework, but we also have RhoConnect clients for iOS, Android, BlackBerry, and JavaScript. So a lot of different ways that you can use RhoConnect in your client apps. There are primarily two ways in which we integrate with backend systems. One is through the use of source adapters, and that's what we're going to use today, and that's more of a pull mechanism. A source adapter sits on the server and reaches out to your back-end systems. And then we also have what are called server plugins, which is a way for your back-ends to communicate with RhoConnect using a RESTful API that we expose. So let's just look a little bit closer at the RhoConnect server. Again, we're going to be utilizing the source adapter technique for integration today. And when you look closely at a source adapter is simply a piece of code that implements a number of methods. Those source adapter methods include query, create, update, delete. And in fact, we also have search methods and a login and log off method. So we're gonna take a look at source adapters very closely in a little bit. But this is sort of list of standard methods that we have available to you in source adapters. Okay, so let's have an overview of what we're going to be doing in this webinar. First, we're going to be creating a source adapter. Now, source adapters can be written in either Ruby or JavaScript. We're going to be utilizing Ruby today. The database that we're going to be connecting to is a MySQL database, although the techniques and the technology that I'm going to be going over with you today are generally applicable to other databases as well, including Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, etc. I have these two bullet items mixed up. Database should read the MySQL employees database, and RDMS should say MySQL. But the database that we're going to be using is just a standard sample database from MySQL called the employees database. It's a fairly sizable database. I think there's about 300,000 records or so in it. But we'll take a look at that in a little bit. The methodology that we're going to be using, the Ruby DBI library, and the graphic that you see is a general look at the DBI architecture. Basically, it's a sort of common framework or API for accessing backend databases, and it's similar in architecture to JDBC. If any of you are Java programmers out there and you're familiar with JDBC, DBI is very similar. And basically what it is you have drivers that you instantiate at runtime that connect to your backend system. For the most part, it's fairly abstract to the end developer, which is great. So for our system requirements, the items that I have had to install on my machine include the DBI Ruby gem. Now, with some of your Ruby installs, the DBI Ruby gem might be installed, but it's always a good practice to make sure of that before getting started. You will need that gem installed in order to get your connectivity. I also had to install the MySQL Ruby gem. This is the Ruby MySQL client, and then finally the DBI driver. Right, this is the gem that connects the DBI framework with the MySQL client, and that gem is called DBD-MySQL. After having those setup requirements installed, I needed to modify my gem file in RHOStudio. I will go over and show you exactly what I had to do. And then finally, from the command line, once you have everything set up, you'll want to do bundle install. Bundler, again, is probably something you guys are familiar with, but if you're not, it basically just make sure that the application you're running, the Ruby application that you're running, has access to all of the gems that you need. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So, without further ado, let's dive into the project, and let's start going over the code and see a demo of how this all works. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start off with a very basic example. Right? We just want to demonstrate some connectivity. We don't want to do anything too fancy. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect. I'm going to pull up my MySQL workbench here. And you can see a little bit of the schema over here on the left-hand side for the employees database. And what we're going to do is we are going to connect to this departments table. And the departments table has a very simple schema. It just basically has a department number and a department name. So that's what we're going to be connecting to. So what we're going to do is I have already set up my project. It's just a standard RhoConnect project, and I've created a source adapter called departments. Now, before we take a look at the source adapter, let me just talk about a little bit about some of the things that I had to do to this project after I created it before going into the source adapter. Now, you'll recall from the slides that I showed you just a moment ago that one of the things that we needed to do was we needed to modify this gem file. So here's the gem file in the RhoConnect project. If I open that up, you'll see that that in here you are basically specifying some of the dependencies of your project, right? Especially with respect to the individual gems that you need. So I'm highlighting a section right here, and that is the section that I added to this gem file. You can see that I've added DBI as a dependency, and in fact, I actually moved that from the JRuby section. So if you go in and modify your gem file, you'll probably just want to move this DBI dependency from the JRuby platform into just a general dependency. I also added the MySQL gem as a dependency and the dbd-MySQL gem as a dependency. Okay. Now, one of the things that I found was that when I did bundle install from the command line, sometimes it would not necessarily regenerate if I had this this gem file .lock already created. Bundle install creates this this gem file .lock. So what you may want to do if you run into the same situation is just delete this gem file .lock file before you do your bundle install from the command line. Okay, there were no other modifications that I had to make to the project. So let's take a look at the actual source adapter. Okay, here is the department's source adapter that I created. You can see at the top, what I need to do is I need to specify that I'm requiring the DBI library. All of the other libraries, such as the MySQL libraries, are going to be loaded up by DBI, so I don't have to worry about those. And the way that I've architected this source adapter is what I'm doing is in the first part of the source adapter, I'm going to define some static text fields. Right, so just in terms of cleanliness of my code and being able to modify my queries and everything, I like to define those text constants up at the top. Right, so you can see that here are the SQL queries that I'm defining. Right, here's my my select query, right, which is going to read the department number and the department name from departments. I've got a create query to insert records, an update query, and a delete query. And the other constants that I'm specifying here is a URL. Now this is the DBI URL for MySQL. This is what will change if I were connecting to, let's say, a different database. So, for instance, if I was connecting to Oracle or SQL Server, the only change in my code would be this would be this URL, right? And again, this is a concept that's would be very similar to any of you that have familiarity with JDBC. My username and password for my database. Let's move down. So the way that or the process that's happening here is I'm going to utilize the login method. So when the login method is called, I'm going to set up a class level variable called dbh, and this is going to be a connection to the database. Okay, so DBI is going to connect to my database URL. It's going to pass in the user information, and it's going to get a connection to that database. I'm going to save that connection as a class level variable so that all of my methods have access to it. And then once I'm finished doing all my work here in the logoff method, I'm going to call the disconnect on that connection. Okay, so let's take a look first at the query method. Okay, in the query method, I'm going to set up my result hash, Again, most of you should have some sort of a passing familiarity with RhoConnect. For those of you who don't, this is the class level variable that holds my results from the query, and this is a convention. So you have to take all of your results from the query. You have to put it in this @result hash, and it will actually be a hash of hashes, as we like to call it. So the next thing that I'm going to do after I create my results hash is I'm going to prepare a statement. You can see I'm utilizing the database connection to prepare the statement, and the statement that I'm using is my query statement that I defined as a constant earlier. Next, we're going to execute that statement. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the results and iterate through the rows that are returned from that statement. Okay. Now, as we iterate through those rows, each row is going to be converted into a hash. So we define our hash initially. Okay. We're going to create an ID, a unique identifier, and in this case, it's going to be the first column. And then what we're going to do is in the hash, we're going to put our items, our department number from the first column in the row, and our department name from the second column in the row. Now, technically speaking, I didn't have to include department number in my item since I'm using it as the ID. But I just wanted to do that just to have all the data available to me in the database instead of having that just as the ID. But I certainly could have just not utilized that because it is being utilized as the ID. So the next thing that I do is we're going to take that item that we created and we're going to set that into the result hash. And we're going to use ID as the identifier. And it's a good practice to call the toString on that identifier simply because the key in the @result hash needs to be a string. After we iterate through the results that are retrieved from our query, we're going to call finish on the statement, and we're all set for the query. If we take a look at the create method, we're going to do something very similar, right? We're going to prepare our statement, only here we're preparing the create statement. Then what we're going to do is we're going to execute that statement. But what we're doing here is we're passing in two parameters. We're passing in the department number parameter that was passed into the create hash, and the department name parameter that was passed into the create hash. And in fact, if you look at the create query, you'll see that we have two parameters that we have to set. So we're setting those two parameters with the department number and the department name. We're finishing our statement after we execute it, and then we're returning the department number as the identifier. Again, very similar now with the update method. We're going to prepare our statement, which is the update statement. We're going to execute it, passing in two parameters, one for the department name, one for the department number, and then we're going to finish. And again, same for the delete statement. So not a whole lot of magic going on here. Pretty straightforward. Not a whole lot of code. So let's see this run now. I've created a client application that that utilizes this source adapter. So let's go ahead and run that. This is our departments test. Now, while my simulator is coming up for us to take a look at, what I'm going to do is I just want to show you one other thing that is just slightly unique to the client app that I specified. So let's open up my client project, and I just want to show you my data model real quick. So the department's data model, the one thing that I will say is I added this one setting that enables full updates. What this means is that any updates I make to the department, it's going to send up all the values whether they've changed or not. And the reason we do this is that in my update statement, I'm always utilizing the department number in my query. So I want the department number sent up every time. I could have set it up to use the ID as well, and that might have been a better way of doing it. But in this case, that's the methodology that I've chose. So here's my simulator. Here is our departments list that has been queried from the back end. We can create a new department. I'm going to give it a number. Give this the webinar department. We're going to create it, and we're going to push it into the back end. And let's go to my workbench here. Actually, that's the titles. Let's get my department's query here. There we go. And let's just see. Here's our webinar departments. What we can do here is we can go in, we can edit it. We can go in and delete it. Okay, so we have our full functionality of create, update, and delete. And so that's a very basic example of just connecting to a backend database and seeing it work with all of the statements that we have here. Now, that's nice, right? That's a very basic example. But what I want to do is I want to show you a couple of other techniques for utilizing this back-end connectivity, right? This is a very simple, very straightforward example. What I've done is I have created another example, okay? And in this example, we're going to get quite a bit more complex. So what we're going to do is we are going to take from our back-end system, and we're going to be pulling from employees. We're going to be pulling from departments, okay, titles. And so what we're going to do, okay, is we're going to actually leverage some of the power of Ruby as an object-oriented language to make defining our individual source adapters a little easier. And what I'm going to do, or what I have done, is I have first, oh, you know what? I'm going to go back for a second. I'm going to go back because I forgot to do something with regards to starting up my RhoConnect server. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do demos without starting up the server first. So give me just a moment to pull up that server. Okay, here we go. So let's let's see. Let me just make sure
So
I'm
right,
right.
hey, Geof, so right now you have your database and your RhoConnect application all kind of sitting on the same machine.
That's right.
It doesn't necessarily need to be set up that way. Obviously, you know, database could be on a remote machine, and RhoConnect could be on a different machine.
That's right. That's exactly right, Rob. Okay, so we're going to start up. We're going to start up my Redis database server. Okay, so my server running. Let's do this again. Let's create a record. Let's run our departments query. And let's look at our departments. Run an update. All right, now let's take a look. Let's take a look at the other project that I was telling you about. So what we're going to do is we're going to define a standard. We're going to define a standard source adapter. Okay, and I'm going to call this the SQL source adapter. This source adapter is going to inherit from our standard source adapter class. Okay. And what we're going to do is in this this source adapter class, in the constructor, we're going to take the source URL, or I'm sorry, the source URL, and we're also going to pass up from our lower classes. We're going to pass up the username and password. Okay, and with those parameters passed to it, we'll create the DBI connection. And we're using the same technique in the log off method, right? When we finish running, we'll disconnect. Now, in our query method, what we're going to do is, again, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to be a little bit more abstract, right? So in our query method here, we're going to pass in the query. We're going to pass in the query parameters, and we're also going to pass in a fields definition. And what we're going to do then is we're going to prepare the query for our statement. This is very similar to what we did in the previous source adapter. Then we're going to bind our parameters. If there are any parameters to bind, we're going to bind them to the statement. Then we're going to execute that statement. And then I created a routine to create the result hash from the statement and the fields. And if we look down at that create result hash method, you'll see that this is very similar to what we did in the last source adapter, right? We're going to create our @result hash. We're going to fetch rows from the statement, completed statement. We're going to, iterate through those rows, and then we're going to take the values from those the fields in the row, and we're going to add them to the result hash. But again, this is a little bit more generic. We're passing in the fields to iterate over. So again, very, very abstract, very generic. This is going to form the base for all of our source adapters for each of our data models. Okay, so that's what the query method is going to do in the SQL source adapter, and we have the bind params method. Again, just a convenience method I created to that for a given statement and given parameters, we're going to take those values and bind them. that's all. That's all. Oh, and we're going to do an update method as well. Now, for this example, I only did a query and an update method, because what we're going to do is we're going to be creating an application that that deals with team members, and each team member is going to have a title. So so for the most part, the team members will not be updatable, but only their titles will be updatable. So we're not going to do a create method and a delete method here, but we'll do query and we'll do update. So that's the SQL class. Now what we're going to do is I created a webinar class that extends from SQL, and what we're doing here is we are setting up the database URL. Right. Again, this is going to be consistent for all of the classes that inherit from this, and this also gives us a nice central point. If I wanted to change which database I was connecting to, all I would need to do is change the URL and my user authentication information. So you can see that in the constructor here, I'm going to call the constructor of the SQL class, and I'm going to pass in the URL and the username and password information. Okay. Now, I'm not going to implement the create and the delete methods here. We're not going to support those as part of this exercise. So now let's take a look at the individual source adapters for the data model. We're going to be connecting to a couple of different tables. Okay, so let's take a look first at the team source adapter. So here is the team source adapter, and you can see that it's really, really small. And the reason that it's small is that I'm inheriting from Webinar, which in turn inherits from SQL. Right, so you can see that a lot of my logic I put into the SQL class, and by using this, the object-oriented property of Ruby, I'm able to create a source adapter, which primarily involves me just setting up my query. Okay, so for the team data model, this is going to be read-only data, so I only really need to implement the query method. It's not going to support updates, deletes, or creates. So all I really need to do here is I need to define my select query. Okay, so you can see that I'm going to be selecting from the employees table, but I'm also going to be doing a join against the department employee many-to-many table. And I'm going to be filtering, and this is one of the techniques that I wanted to show you. Typically, when you're connecting to a back-end system and you're exposing data out to an individual user, you will want to tailor that data for the user. Now, in our first example, we just pulled all the departments down, right? We didn't use any filtering information. But here, we're going to filter. And the way that we're going to filter is I am going to pass in, or I'm going to utilize my user login ID as a filtering mechanism. So I'm going to get all of the members from the employee table that are members of my team. And this is the query that selects the team members from the employee database that are part of my team. Okay, and it's all based off of my employee number, which is the parameter that I'm going to pass to that query. I set up the fields that are going to be returned. In this case, it's going to be employee number, first name, and last name for my team members. And then in the query method, all I need to do is I need to set up the query parameter, and that's going to be my current my login name, which you get by doing current user.login. And then I'm just going to pass those parameters up to the constructor. Okay, so again, this is defining this source adapter becomes very easy because I'm leveraging the object-oriented nature of Ruby. Now, the other The other data that we're going to pull down are the titles that are associated with each one of the team members. Okay, so here is the titles source adapter. And again, you can see that this is very small, and it's because I'm leveraging, I'm inheriting from the webinar class. Okay, so all I need to do is I need to define my query statement, my update statement, because we're going to support updates on the titles data model. I'm going to specify what the key is for updating each of these records, and then just specify the fields that we're bringing down or that we're utilizing, which is going to be employee number and title. Okay. And then again, all I do in the query method is the same thing as we did in team, which is define the query parameter, which is going to be my login name, and then pass that information up to the constructor in the SQL class. Now, as I said, in titles, we are going to be supporting updates, right? So we define the update method. The query parameter that we're going to use is the title, and then and then we just pass those query parameters up to the constructor for update. Okay, so again, you can see that by using inheritance and the object-oriented nature of Ruby, defining new source adapters for our individual data models becomes quite easy. You can see that as we would, if we were to progress with this project, the more source adapters for each data model that we add, it's primarily an exercise of just defining a couple of statements here, a couple of SQL statements that we're utilizing. Okay, so let me first shut down my my server instance that I have running, and we're going to start up the other RhoConnect server.
Hey Geof, when you were connecting before on the client end, did you need to log on or log off and log on before you did the sync, or?
You know, I think you're right, Rob, and let's do that in this exercise that we're going to test. Okay, so the RhoConnect server that I just shut down was for the departments project. Let's start up the RhoConnect server for this project that we were just going over. Okay, so we start up our RhoConnect server. I'm going to close down my simulator. And now let's run my application. Okay, so here's my application. This is for our team that we've set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in. Now this login is important because remember, this is what's going to be used as the filter for my data. Log in. We're going to go to the team. So here's a list of all the team members from the employees database that are are part of my team. So if we click on Geof, we see that he's currently got a title of senior engineer. I can edit that title. Let's say we're going to demote him down to engineer. And Elvis DeMeyer is actually the user that I have. Let's say that I've been promoted from senior engineer to team lead. Perform that update. Synchronize those changes. Okay, so you see that Geof has his changes. I have my changes. Let's go to the backend database. Okay, so you can see that 10022 was Geof, and in fact, I think you can see his, so here's Geof's employee ID number, which is 10022. You can see that the title for 10022 has been changed to engineer. And now if we go to Elvis DeMeyer, which is the user that I'm using, the title is team lead. This is user 10030, and the value has been changed to team lead. And I think you're right, Rob. I think in my previous departments example, I didn't log in. So I think we have some time, and that's basically what I wanted to cover for the demo. I just want to just go back and try departments one more time.
Yeah, I think I don't think you have that pointer to DVH set, right? Because you were saying that in the login, and I think that's why the rest did not go through.
Yeah. So let's close this. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to my run configuration, and for departments, I'm just going to clean the. Okay, now let's close down my other RhoConnect server. And let's spin up the RhoConnect server for my departments. Here's my departments server. Okay, so my department server is up. We're going to log in. I'm going to use the same login, even though we're not filtering. Okay, so the department's data has been brought down. Let's delete this record. Let's create a new record. Sync our data. Let's take a look at departments. And here's our webinar department that shows up. So, yeah, you were right, Rob. Thank you very much for pointing that out. So you can see we've gone through two examples. One very trivial, just pulling down all of the department information, running through the CRUD operations on that, and on the other side, what we've done is we've done a little bit more complex example where we've actually run through an inheritance hierarchy that is meant to put a lot of our logic in a central source adapter, and then for our individual source adapters that map to our data models, we inherit from that to make creating our new source adapters very simple and straightforward, and really mostly a matter of just writing SQL queries, right? So with that, I'll take any questions that you guys have.
All right. So we do have a bunch of questions. While I'm going through those, let me just launch a question I have for you guys. If you can just fill this out while we're going through the questions, that would be great. We're asking about data synchronization and how you're doing it today. So Geof, we have a couple questions. So first off, the code behind these demos. Can we share it and post it with this webinar?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see any problem with that whatsoever.
All right, so we'll get that out to you guys along with this presentation. All right, so let's see. We have a couple of questions. First of all, well, I think we might have covered this already just by showing how we had a problem initially, and this question was, when is login and log off called by RhoConnect?
Yeah, login and log off is called every time that we do a sync. So before you do, so the first thing that happens in a source adapter, right, is the constructor is called. Right after the constructor, login is called. Then you'll go through your other operations like query, create, update, etc. And then after all those operations are called, then the log off is called.
Okay. Great. Next question came from Maury. When you were declaring your variables, you had @DBH and @result, and he was wondering why you declare them as a class variable instead of an instance variable.
Yeah. So actually, @DBH means it is an instance variable. I may have misspoken. If you look at my screen, the @ symbology means that it's a class level variable, right? Whereas the @DBH means that it's an instance level variable. So @DBH here, it's an instance level variable, and it is shared across the methods of this instance, but is not available to the whole, any other instances of the class. Whereas if you define something as that is a class level variable that is available to all instances of the class it's shared. And it makes sense, right? Because there's nothing different about this query for all intents and purposes. It's just a constant. So that's the difference in terms of the way those variables are set up.
Okay. Next question has to do with data that's in the actual database. If we have sensitive data, passwords or credit card numbers, what are some of the ways that we can do to protect that data and ensure that it's being transmitted between the client, RhoConnect, and the back-end server in a secure manner?
Yeah, well, there's a number of different ways that you can do that, right? Certainly between the RhoConnect client and the RhoConnect server, you can use HTTPS to secure that data. You can also use various techniques to encrypt that data, right? There are encryption routines in Ruby that are available on the for use on the server and also on the client. But in general, the way that you would architect this, is that RhoConnect would sit in a DMZ, right, in your data center or your customer's data center or whatever. And typically, your database would be behind the firewall. Right, so the connectivity and the data transfer between RhoConnect in your DMZ and your backend server, which is behind the firewall, would not be available to anyone. No one else could see it because it's secured. So that's really how you would architect the system and protect your data.
Okay. A couple people asked this question. Instead of doing direct SQL statements, can you also, do stored procedures?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I don't think there's anything tricky to calling stored procedures. I haven't tried it, but my recollection from when I used to call stored procedures in writing SQL is that it was really in the statement itself. For instance, if you're calling stored procedures from JDBC, you wouldn't do anything different except just modify your query to call them.
Okay,
so I don't think
like what? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. No, there was a follow-up on to that question in regards to the location. I think you covered it before. The database. Right now, we're doing it on localhost, but you have the URL that could easily be a remote URL, HTTP, or some other way to connect to a database that's remote.
That's right. That's exactly right.
All right. Actually, a couple more questions, and I know we're running out of time. Error handling. So various errors across the chain. How would we handle that?
So you'll notice from my code that there is no error handling whatsoever, and that's really because this is just for demo purposes. Obviously, in a production environment, you would have all sorts of validation and error handling. So there's a couple of things that you would do. Ruby has a mechanism similar to try-catch in Java. I can't remember exactly what the syntax is. I think it might be something like begin and rescue, but check your Ruby syntax. It's very similar to a try-catch. So that would allow you to catch any errors that happen. And what happens is there is a specific technique for handling errors in source adapters where you can handle it at the source adapter level, or you can raise an exception and handle it down in the client. It's kind of your choice. But your best bet would be to check our documentation on that. Or maybe sometime in the future, Rob, we'll have a webinar on error handling in RhoConnect.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So it sounds good. The other question that came in has to do with the query method. So it's kind of a two-part question. Is the query method, the intent of the query method to tell the client effectively what is new in the data set on the back end?
Well, basically what happens is the query method is supposed to select the entire body of data from the back end for that user, and then what happens is that data gets compared with a cache that represents what the server knows that the client already has. The server then calculates the differential and sends those deltas down to the client. So in that manner, the client is always kept up to date for any new changes. So the query method, typically grabs the whole body of data, then calculates the differential and sends it down to the client. However, there are techniques that you can use where you only select the differential from the back end, and that gets sent down to the client, and that goes into a little bit more advanced data management techniques, like utilizing the bypass. I can't remember again what the setting is, but it allows you to bypass having the server cache that data. And again, that's a little bit of a more advanced data management technique that is a little bit out of scope here, but there's basically different techniques that you can use in your query method. The one that I'm using right now, which is the most common, is I select all the data from the back end for my particular user, and I then let the server manage the deltas that are sent down to the device.
Yeah, and we're going to have a series on performance. We did one last week on the client. We're also going to cover some things around RhoConnect, and on the server side, what we can do is, sounds like an optimization or another method to make things happen quicker. I believe the performance is quite well even just doing it this way, right? Just selecting all and handling it on the server side. But there's some performance tuning and tips and tricks we can go over that as well.
Yeah, right, and there's also go ahead.
Sorry, Geoff, go ahead.
I was just going to say that there's also data partitioning, where there's the whole topic of data management is very advanced, and I think that we probably will have several webinars on that.
Yep. Okay, one last question, and then we'll let you go. schema changes. We didn't really talk about that and how this affects, what you would do in your source adapters. I want to spend a moment just discussing how to handle schema changes.
Sure. We actually have a methodology for handling schemas that change from time to time, and it's called our metadata framework. Now, that also is out of scope for my talk today. But basically, if I weren't using our metadata framework, which is the right way to handle schema changes, but if I weren't using that, the schema changes here would just be a matter of changing my queries. And the nice thing about the client apps that I've created is that I'm using the property bag data model, which is in and of itself dynamic. So in terms of my schema changes here, all I would need to do is change the items that you see here. I would have to change my query, I would change my fields, and that's it. I'm good to go. So very easy to make schema changes, but as I said, we do also have this this metadata framework that allows you to more elegantly handle schema changes, but that of course is a topic unto itself.
All right, so we have a couple more minutes. Let me just, so Geof, hey, thanks a lot. I know you have to run, you have a hard stop. We do have a couple minutes left, and as we've started this new tradition, just to kind of share a quick, I've been calling it a resource of the week. This is either a developer tool, a website, a book, something that will make your life easier. Today, since we were talking about Ruby, I know we still have quite a bit of Ruby newbies, if you will, and this website, I Want to Learn Ruby, has a couple of different interesting tutorials and discussions around Ruby, and can really get you up to speed with some fundamentals around Ruby. One of them is this tryruby.org, which basically lets you start typing in here, and will actually guide you through a tutorial on Ruby. So it only takes 15 minutes, and it really gives you some really fundamentals on Ruby syntax and structures and things like that. So just, again, it's really just kind of a quick tip. Most of you on the call probably know this, but for those who are still new to Ruby, this is a really good resource. So just wanted to share that with you guys quickly. Okay. All right, let's see if there's any other last-minute questions that came in. Otherwise, we will conclude the conference. Let's see. Give it another second here. All right. Doesn't look like there's any more questions. So, Geof, thanks a lot again for presenting today. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Rob. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Next week, we're talking about building applications for big Windows. So catch you then. Bye-bye.